No paths are bound. A fan fiction by Cataclysmic Calamity. I remember you. The bandages over his eyes create a natural disguise. And there are days when he's lucky and people decide to offer charity. Enough for him to have a hot meal. What little remains of his skills from cultivation allows him to navigate somewhat. Enough for menial work. People let him help with the harvest, tend to farm animals. But that work comes and goes. Eventually, he finds one of his own shrines in a remote village, worn down and abandoned. It feels fitting. Local farmers give him work, and when they can't, he goes hungry. He used to spend many nights hungry as a child, refusing food due to his delicate palate, but this is different. This is cold, gnawing hunger, laying on the floor of his shrine, waiting for sleep to spare him from the ache. But then, someone starts bringing food. The first time he wakes up with a plate of fruit beside his head. He's too hungry to wonder. Maybe a farmer took pity, sent one of his children out to leave a lame beggar something to eat. He devours them with little pride, even the berries that he used to loathe as a child. But every morning, there's a plate. Often in the evenings too, when he returns from a day of working himself to the bone in the fields. Fruits, meats. When there's bread, Xie Lian sheds a few grateful tears. After weeks of this, his curiosity gets the best of him. He's curled up on the shrine floor, turned on his side, feigning sleep. And the moment he hears the soft clink of a plate hitting the stone floor, he's quick as a viper, rolling over, snatching out until his fingers wrap around someone's wrist. Who are you? He doesn't receive an answer. Why are you helping me? He can't imagine a reason. Maybe for the occasional kind gesture, but this is... That's when Xie Lian notices how thin the wrist in his grasp is, that the person is trembling, probably from the god's strength. He lets go, almost ashamed. I'm sorry, you don't need to be... The figure scrambles away before he can speak more, left alone on the stone floor, hand outstretched. Afraid, he finishes, somewhat bitter. From then on, the food is left on the shrine's steps. Never too close. Xie Lian still feels a presence sometimes. He'll come back and find the floor swept. One day, there's a blanket. Nothing extravagant, but far better than sleeping with thin, torn rags. Part of him wonders if Function disobeyed his orders and came to find him, but even if he had disobeyed, Function wouldn't hide from him. And that arm, it belonged to someone younger. That much he's certain of. It couldn't be someone beyond that mid-teens. But then who would be helping him now, and why? When the entire world hates him, has forgotten him. Often he can feel someone watching, hanging in the distance, never daring to approach. Xie Lian sits up from where he was gathering stones by the edge of a stream, slowly turning his head in that direction. He can't see the eyes on him, but Xie Lian can feel them. I know you're there, he calls gently. He hears the soft rustling of leaves, the snap of a twig, like the stranger is about to leave, and his voice takes on a panicked edge. Please! The noises stop, and his voice wobbles. Please, don't go. He's lonely. Xie Lian can't remember the last time he had someone listen to him when he spoke. What it felt like to have someone by his side. It's pitiful, really. He hangs his head, waiting for the youth to flee, but now he hears the sound of them cautiously creeping closer. They don't say a word, but when they're close enough, Xie Lian reaches out, tugging at the hem of a shirt sleeve, soft and worn. "Why are you here?" It's a simple question, but the ache in his voice adds so much weight to it. The voice that answers is that of a young man. "To serve His Highness." Xie Lian's expression freezes, and now he's the one flinching away, trembling. He thought he had become accustomed to the shame that came from falling so low, but in the end, he had only taken comfort in anonymity. "You know who I am?" The voice sounds a little more certain, almost cocky. If Xie Lian wasn't struggling between emotions, he would have been endeared. "I would know Diansha anywhere." The title makes him flinch again, shrinking towards the edge of the stream. "Don't. You shouldn't call me that." He senses the boy starting to retreat again, worried that he might have offended the god, and Xie Lian grabs that sleeve again, clinging tightly. "Don't go," he repeats, his voice trembling. "Please don't go." Instead of answering verbally, the youth kneels beside him. Xie Lian shudders with relief, fingers tightening in the fabric of his shirt, and he repeats himself once again. "Why are you here?" He can hear the confusion in the boy's tone. "To serve? Why?" Xie Lian presses, his voice raw. "I can't give you anything now." There is a silence, and part of Xie Lian wonders if the boy hadn't realized that until now, that maybe he thought this was all some sort of self-imposed penance. After all, what could he know of cursed shackles? And now, he'll leave. Beneath the bandages, Xie Lian's eyes fill with tears. He'll leave. He will. Xie Lian knows he will. Everyone did, and the ones who didn't, he pushed them away a long, long time ago. There's no one left now. He's trembling when the boy answers. "I don't want anything." At first, Xie Lian doesn't believe him. He's cautious, distrustful, like a wounded animal. The boy still comes every day, brings the food directly, morning and night, quietly tells the god about current events when he asks. He catches the boy praying sometimes, never kneeling, head bowed as he stands before the shrine altar. Xie Lian reminds him that he can't answer, that in this state he can't even hear the child's prayers, his tone more than a little bitter. He can't see the smile on his face. "That isn't why I pray." Xie Lian's brow furrows, and the smile on the boy's face is invisible to him, but it carries more faith than a god has ever known. "Diansha already answered this servant's prayer once. That was enough." Xie Lian pauses, staring in his direction blindly. "When did he?" "What did you pray for?" The boy doesn't look up, hands still clasped in prayer. An answer. The memory pricks at him, and his fingers twitch as he strains to remember. To what? A reason to continue living in this world. Xie Lian's breaths halt. He hasn't forgotten that day. It was only a few years ago, after all, but still. What was the answer? The boy's reply is simple, but it robs Xie Lian of his ability to speak. You. How foolish he had been back then, thinking he could save everyone, that he could be... that Xie Lian could be anyone's reason for living, after the damage he's done, all through his own selfish arrogance, and believing in him hasn't brought the boy very far. No, he's spending his days bringing a fallen god scraps to survive. That isn't a reason for living. Maybe it's an excuse, an obligation, but it's nothing worth believing in. When he finally finds the ability to speak, Xie Lian's voice is thick with so much self-pity, it makes him sick. I guess it wasn't a very good answer, was it? For once, the boy's reply is sharp. I don't want a different one. Xie Lian can't understand it, but it's the reply that the child has always given. Forget about me. I won't. Don't bother with me anymore. This one won't leave Dianxia's side. Even if I get lost, I'll always come back. He never believed him. Always thought that the boy would change his mind, but he never did, even now, after months of this. Xie Lian asks, not for the first time, Who are you? The boy has never answered before, always demurred, calling himself a believer, a servant. The reply doesn't come as easily this time. He hesitates. And eventually, like the answer might horrify him, he mumbles it under his breath. If Xie Lian's ears weren't so sensitive by now, he wouldn't have heard. Hong? The god's eyes widen instantly. Hongar? Silence follows, and all Xie Lian can hear are the boy's trembling breaths. They sound a little wet, laden with the occasional sniffle, and eventually, Dianxia remembered me? His voice isn't smooth, stubborn, or cocky. It's small, awed, thick with tears. In truth, it was a memory that Xie Lian had almost forgotten, with the chaos that followed it. Normally when he thought back on the boy, it was when he was angry with Qirong, or when he would occasionally wonder what became of him. Xie Lian had assumed the plague took him. The fact that it didn't, that means that the small, terrified child that he caught in his arms that day, the boy who clung to him later, bleeding and broken, sobbing that he wasn't cursed, became a killer. Xie Lian's salvation clearly hadn't offered him much, but I remember you, he whispers, lips trembling. Xie Lian finds something in himself that he thought was gone, worn away with every mistake he had made. Faith. His arms open, and the child is hesitant, but eventually he falls into them, his body trembling with silent sobs. He isn't alone. His God is shedding tears of his own, slipping from underneath the bandages over his eyes, making shining paths down his cheeks as he holds Hongar in his arms. I remember you, he whispers again, voice breaking as Hongar clings to him. Xie Lian believes him. He believes that, out of everyone else in the world, this child might see what others don't, that he knows how it feels to be alone, broken, and scorned. Xie Lian holds the boy until he falls asleep in his arms, stroking his hair.